This is a personal essay called Flipping the Script, a year traveling back in time with my flip phone. This month marks my 1-year anniversary with my flip phone. Whatever would possess someone to use a flip phone or a dumb phone when they don't have to? I got the idea from a friend of mine at a birthday party after he pulled out his antiquated device at a restaurant. "Does that actually work?" I asked him. "Sure," he replied. "As a phone, you can't do much else with it." A light bulb went on in my head. A little while later, I walked into the local Verizon store and inquired as to whether they had any flip phones in stock. As it turned out, they had 2 left. I picked out a black clamshell-designed TCL Flip Pro and walked triumphantly out of the store, freed from smartphone tyranny. This isn't a social experiment or some kind of statement. I wasn't addicted to my phone. I'm not a big texter. I hate social media. I avoid the news whenever possible. I would use my phone to check the scores and the weather, do the New York Times mini crossword, and that was about it. I simply didn't feel like having a smartphone was making me a happier person. All right, maybe this is a little bit of a statement. How did I get here? I think it started when I became a girl dad in 2015. I began to yearn for a simpler, safer, slower world for Caroline to grow up in. I started resenting technology, developing a particular disdain for smartphones and how they contribute to age compression, the marketing of items to children that are more suitable for adults. I used to enjoy reading the news on my phone with my morning coffee like normal people. As the news became more upsetting, this little ritual became less enjoyable. If it bleeds, it leads, morphed into, if they're ticked, they will click. The financial media is hardly exempt from sensationalism either. As a compliance analyst, I review marketing materials for financial planners for a living, so I get my fill of money talk at work. I began working from home in 2014. I set up an office with a wireless keyboard, router, a mouse, 2 monitors. After a few years, I was struggling with headaches and brain fog and insomnia. I could barely function. Someone's blood tests at the hospital were negative, and someone suggested that there might be something in my living environment that was causing these health issues. So we hired a home biologist, Christopher Bell, my man, to investigate. I didn't realize you were going to be here tonight. He showed up with all kinds of esoteric gear, including Gauss meters to measure electromagnetic fields, and something that looked like a giant boom mic with a long mechanical arm that was supposed to determine the ambient electrical field in the room. I was reminded of Peter Venkman, Bill Murray's character in the movie Ghostbusters. Mr. Bell suggested removing or replacing any wireless devices we could, moving the router to the basement and turning it off whenever possible. Apparently, the radio waves used by wireless or smart devices can seriously mess with our heads, interfering with sleep and causing other problems. We followed his advice, and I felt significant relief from my symptoms right away. Think of a long-distance call on your cell phone that lasts for over an hour. After we hang up, we may notice a tingling sensation in our ear, or that our hand or forearm that was holding the phone is burning slightly. I felt this way much of the time. At its worst, it was as if my head was a car that was engulfed in flames, with the gas pedal stuck to the floor. As you can imagine, alleviation from this discomfort would be worth sacrificing the convenience that wireless technology offers. I began to distance myself from the one wireless device we tend to have on us at all times, the cell phone. First, I'd remove it from my pocket and leave it around the house, only picking it up when I needed to use it. As time went on, it was less unusual for me to leave home without my smartphone. so maybe I could live without it entirely. The young woman associate at the local Verizon store didn't think I would last more than a few weeks with my new flip phone. And I must admit, there was quite an adjustment period. Texting on a flip phone is a chore, which requires dedication. Texting and driving with a smartphone is dangerous. Texting and driving with a flip phone is nearly impossible. The temptation isn't there. Flip phones are the reason that text language exists. For example, you have a keyboard with the same button for the letters A, B, and C, and the number 2. To type the letter C, you have to push the button 3 times. To type the number 2, you have to hit another button several times to convert to numbers, and then the 2, and the same goes for capital letters and punctuation. It's exhausting. One might forgo texting altogether and simply call, but it's more socially acceptable to text these days. Calling's only for emergencies. I have found the solution is to mince words while texting and keep the conversation as short as possible. This has not improved my social life. I returned to the Verizon store after a week and informed the associate that I was having difficulty reading group texts. She just laughed at me. "I'm not surprised," she said. "Ready to switch back to your smartphone?" My wife was not thrilled about my new phone. "It's like you traded in one of our cars for a moped without asking me," she said. "We used to travel before smartphones. I'm not sure how we managed this. When you're driving in traffic, paper maps simply don't cut it. I visited my son Avery in Chicago last February and tried navigating the Windy City with directions printed from the MapQuest website. It did not go well. I made the mistake of not following the directions to the letter, not bothering to check them until I was in central Illinois. By then I was way off course. Eventually I broke down and called a friend north of the city where I planned to stay the night. Feeling bashful about my flip phone, I made up a story about my GPS not working, and he talked me through it. After spending a nice day with Avery, I was on my own, trying to follow my paper directions back to where I was staying, successfully this time, but in reverse and in the dark. To make matters worse, my phone battery had died. The car charger wasn't working. I stopped at several gas stations, each time the attendant patiently scribbling down directions for me from his smartphone to no avail. In retrospect, I could have bought a new charger and called my friend for directions, or called Avery and crashed at his place, but it was a long day and I was quite tired and not thinking clearly. Eventually, I found myself overlooking the lights of Midway Airport at the junction of Highway 55. I knew that 55 South connected with Interstate 80. To hell with it, I thought, and drove home. After several rest stops, a midnight Pepsi, and a near collision with some deer crossing Highway 1 just south of Iowa City, I made it home safely and crawled into bed around 3 a.m. After this experience, I caved and reactivated my old Android to be used strictly as a GPS device when traveling. My next adventure was visiting my son Caleb in Minneapolis. As I approached the downtown area, I began to wonder if somewhere back in northern Iowa, I had entered his exact address into Google Maps or just the city of Minneapolis. To my horror, my smartphone, Smart, had frozen and I couldn't alter the directions. With the robotic female voice insisting that I drive further and further into the city, I gave up and called Caleb on my flip phone. Oh, the irony. Fortunately, I was able to reach him and he patiently directed me to his apartment. In addition to sometimes providing helpful directions, smartphones give us instant access to information that can help us make decisions, sparing us character-building experiences, much in the way that iTunes can help us compile a playlist of hits. By contrast, listening to music on vinyl requires more of a commitment. I began collecting records several years ago and have discovered some wonderful deep tracks listening to music this way. The very first flip phone was invented in 1996 by Motorola. These phones evolved and became more prevalent until the BlackBerry released its Pearl device in 2006, ushering in the smartphone era. Apple quickly followed suit, improving the existing technology when it introduced the initial iPhone a year later. Like many people, I first owned a flip phone in the early 2000s. I didn't switch to a BlackBerry until about 2009, and then my first iPhone a couple years later. My TCL Flip Pro isn't as dumb as it looks. It has voice recognition and internet access. But good luck trying to use it. It would be easy to write off my flip phone experiment as folly or nostalgia. The benefits include more peace of mind and less distractions. However, there have also been many moments of frustration and sometimes a sense of isolation. I'm not sure I'm ready to give up on my flip phone just yet. I'm also hesitant to recommend that other people join the flip phone revolution. We're spitting into fierce winds. It may be possible to live without a smartphone in a small town like Fairfield, Iowa. In a metropolitan area, not so much. There are apps that are vital for finding parking discounts, or for hiring a driver so you don't have to deal with parking at all. Even brick and mortar businesses are forcing customers to use smartphones by going paperless, doing away with hard tickets, menus, and cash. So I don't see the flip phone making a comeback like vinyl records. Sometimes things from the past should stay there.